spirit forces that are behind the different aspects of nature. And the supreme god or goddess for many of them is what they would call Mother Earth. And it's very, very seductive today because there is a proper concern on the part of all people with conservation of the earth and its resources. You know, when Adam and Eve were put in the Garden of Eden, God put them there to tend the garden.
Take care of it.
Exactly. They were to use it for food, but they were also to take care of it and tend to it. And Adam named all the animals. He was given dominion over them, not to abuse, but to properly use them and help them, as it were. And so what we find is through fallen mankind's influences, the earth has been horribly abused and polluted and misused. And so pagans and witches have found a listening ear amongst some extreme environmentalists. And that has given them, along with other pop culture examples today in TV and the movies and so on, that has given pagans and witches a particular inroad in people's curiosity that maybe there's some answers here that we've overlooked. And what they don't understand for most people when they first get into this is that witchcraft has been around for literally thousands of years.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yes. The Bible in the Old Testament tells us about witches and witchcraft, and the Lord had forbidden it. But the long and short of it is that witches quite often don't believe in Satan. They think that is a Christian concept, but they do believe that there are spirit beings and spirit forces, some of which can be evil. Witchcraft today, one of its branches is known as Wicca. And you can find Wicca being presented in all sorts of forums, public meetings, public discourses, school rooms, as really just being an earth-based religion, an alternative religion. In fact, in the military, Wicca is recognized as a religion, and there are Wicca chaplains, as it were, in the military. So in our own armed forces of this country, there are witches, practicing witches.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Wicca is one of the fastest-growing religions in the world today, based on what it was in terms of numbers and what it is becoming. And we're gonna be getting more into that. You had mentioned, though, Rick, before we go the direction of Wicca. First of all, folks, if you have a thought, question, give us a call at 443-9782, 443-WSUB. You'd mentioned that there were examples of witchcraft and so forth in the Old Testament and all of that. Let's take a few minutes and sort of set some groundwork as to some biblical examples, perhaps, of witchcraft and perhaps God's viewpoint of that.
Well, the one that comes to mind first is found in Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter, verses 10 and 11. And there we read, "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead."
Boy, that's a long list.
Yes, it's a long list which demonstrates once again how active and productive Satan and the fallen demons had been in planting all these false ideas in people's minds of how to worship. You know, people want to worship something. That's part of what's in us. Even though there are some atheists, they're few in number, but there are many false religions because men and women are trying to find a way to express their spirituality. And Satan and these fallen demons took advantage of that desire to worship and express spirituality and supplanted lies for the truth. And one of these lies is that there is good forces of spirit beings that are working through the power of nature.
Okay, so you have this long laundry list, and God said at the beginning of that scripture you read in Deuteronomy, "There shall not be found among you anyone who does any of these things." So obviously God's viewpoint of this is not very positive. As a matter of fact, in the Jewish law, the penalty for witchcraft was death.
Well, that's what's interesting is with the nation of Israel, God gave them the standards to live by because he knew that the rest of the world was corrupted with all these false religions. And they were his chosen people through Abraham's faithfulness, and they were given God's standards of righteousness and holiness, but they were just given some good common sense laws that they should just nip these evils in the bud. Now, the hope is that we believe those people will be resurrected in the future, in the day of judgment. But then it was imperative for these evil forces to be stopped in their tracks.
Okay, now let's talk about that a little bit, because I know you and I talked before the program about this somewhat, but I know that, like with Wicca, going back to that, now we've looked at a little bit of scriptural background of witchcraft in the Old Testament. Wiccans will tell you that, well, there are good witches and bad witches. There are those who are looking at the dark side versus the light side. As a matter of fact, Wicca views itself as what is called white witchcraft. Wicca, just in terms of a little bit of definition, if you will. And I want to get your response to all of this. First of all, you had mentioned they believe in spiritual powers, not necessarily as Satan. They have a respect for nature. Wicca is a natural religion grounded in the earth. All living things are regarded as having spirit. That almost gives like a sacredness to everything. And it, like you said, has that. It's got a very attractive pull to a certain type of people. The main rule of behavior for a Wiccan is what they call the Wiccan Rede, and it reads, "And it harm none, do what thou wilt." Basically, this means that a person should feel free to do whatever they want to as long as it does not harm themselves or anyone else. Now, Rick, when you think about that, I mean, what is wrong with, if it's not going to harm anybody, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not harming yourself or anybody? What's wrong with having that respect for nature, and can you really lump this white witchcraft in with all of the black dark side?
Well, it's a good point, and I think that's what, again, makes witchcraft so seductive. It's the packaging and the presentation. You know, just paraphrasing, you can do what you want as long as you don't harm others. That's really situational ethics. And situational ethics means that basically you make your own rules based on a given situation without an absolute right and wrong. And we've really been blessed by getting a set of rules from the Lord on what is morally right and morally wrong. We still have choice. And there's consequences associated with choice. You reap what you sow, as it were. But with situational ethics, you become your own law. And again, this is very appealing to a lot of people. But the end result is that in this packaging, we find that there are mistakes made when people think that they're not harming someone else, when indeed, in fact, they're doing great harm to other people. Well, let me just give a little example. Let's say someone drinks and becomes an alcoholic. They're saying, I'm not harming anyone else. Mm-hmm. But what we find out quite often is they're destroying their family lives of those that love that individual. So they think they're not hurting anyone else because they're the one who's drinking and becoming an alcoholic. Yet in fact, that individual's mother and father, maybe their wife or husband, maybe their children, their friends,